So this is going to be a talk about reverse engineering and trying to automate the reverse engineering part of, when you write exploits. Like, this is the most consuming part usually. So we're going to try to automate as much as possible the reverse engineering involved in invalid memory write exploitation. Okay, so just a quick introduction. So I'm French. If my accent gets weird or if you don't understand something, yeah. So the volume higher. We need some assistance here. All right, so I'm French. If you don't hear, if you don't understand what I'm saying, basically it's okay. You let me know, and I will try to reformulate or repeat or whatever. The volume is okay now? Okay. So I currently live in Australia. I have my own company with a couple of friends in France. We work mostly for financial institutions, and our job is like, we try to do some, it's a cross between pen testing and research. Like, our clients expect us to come with absolute new ways to find bugs in software and stuff like that. And part of my job is writing exploits, actually, for my clients, for their own infrastructure and stuff. And this is a pretty time-consuming process, and sometimes, like, your clients have unreasonable expectations, like you to write an exploit in 2 days or something, which if you use standard technology is just plain not doable. So this is what forced me to basically try to automate this process. So I've been a speaker at several conferences, and I co-organize a small conference in Paris, which is called Akito Argosum. Maybe you've heard of it. It's pretty good. So if you want to submit something very technical, like, okay, we don't do web applications and stuff. We're more focused on, either reverse engineering or infrastructure, but it has to be something like pretty technical. Anyway, here we go. Yeah, so I don't, in my free time at least, unless you pay me for it, I don't do web application and stuff. So this is going to be a bit technical. If you're not at all familiar with assembly or exploitation, it may be a bit tough. Anyway, so we'll start with a few basics. If it gets boring, you guys just let me know. You raise your fist or something, and I will skip that. Then I will explain why a debugger needs to be environment aware, and we will talk about a specific tool I've been designing, which is called Pmcma. We'll see what it stands for, and how it can save heaps of time when trying to develop an exploit. So there are really two sides of it. Like, either you want to write exploits yourself, and it's pretty interesting, like, to save your time and stuff. Or if you're more on the defensive side, this tool is going to help you determine if a given vulnerability is actually, if a given bug is actually a vulnerability, and if it's exploitable or not. And finally, we'll see what I believe is a new technique for a specific type of vulnerabilities, invalid memory write, and we'll see how to desynchronize the stack to achieve proper code execution. So far, so good? Okay. So the whole talk is about Pmcma, which stands for Post-Memory Corruption Memory Analysis, or Memory Analyzer, if you will. It's basically a debugger. So it's based on ptrace. It should be portable in pretty much any Unix system, provided you have like ptrace and fork. Actually, even Windows has fork. I discovered that like a few days ago. So Windows at some point needed to be POSIX compliant, so it could be sold to militaries. And you can do a proper fork under Windows in the sense, copy and write fork, not an ugly fork like replicating the process section by section. So theoretically, the tool could be ported to Windows, but currently it's only Linux, x86, and 64-bit. All right, so what does this debugger do? Actually, it allows you to test exploitation scenarios and experiment with a given process. The output, until 3 days ago, was just a roadmap to exploitation and not a proper exploit. We'll see how we can simulate a proper exploit, actually. All right, and it's focusing mostly on invalid memory access. So we start by defining exactly what I mean by that. Okay, I give you a demo because, like, okay, it's a bit tough to explain a tool you've been spending literally months working on, because, like, it's an iterative process for myself. Like, I first had a first draft, which I enhanced and stuff, and it may be a bit complicated for me to, explain you what I want to do without a proper example. So we're going to start with a small example. And later on, I will describe you exactly what it does and how it works. By the way, this talk is not at all how to use the tool. It's more about how it's built and what it can achieve. Okay, which process do you want to debug? Which application is cool? Which one? Bash. That's not cool, come on. Yeah, SSH. SSH or Apache or something? Okay, so who wants SSH? Who wants Apache? Sorry, buddy. Okay, so let's grab the PID of SSH. So I'm gonna start a new SSH session. I mean, SSH is a forking daemon, right? So if I create a new connection by just SSHing into my own box, I'm gonna create a new thread for it, and this is the PID. I need the process ID of it to launch the debugger. So let's just SSH to localhost. All right. Okay, so that should be the new process. Okay, since the debugger is based on ptrace, I need root privileges to launch the debugger, right? Because SSH is privileged. Okay, it's going to be a bit fast, so I'm going to just pipe the output. Here we go. All right, so it's you guys can see the screen. Yeah. So it's giving me a bunch of information, like what's the PID of the command, like what's the PID of the process we're analyzing and stuff. The instruction is stopped on, the registers at crash time and stuff. So actually, all the stuff are like, first off, studying, like defining exactly on what one instruction we have interrupted the process. Then it does a bit of analysis, like trying to dereference the stack to verify it's not being corrupted. Okay, that's not too, I mean, if we don't get to crash SSH, I reckon this is not too useful, but there are other modes you can start the debugger with, like you can give it a command line and stuff instead of just attaching to a process. Sometimes it gets handy. Then it checks a bit of properties of the binary, like was it compiled as position independent executable? Do we have SSP in place, like stack cookies? Are we using Fortify source, which is an enhancement of the compiler to have a hardened toolchain? We check for partial relocation and full relocation. What's the difference, basically? Anybody familiar with railroad? Yeah, so basically you have two modes of it. When it's partial, it's just a rearrangement of the sections inside the binary to avoid certain kinds of overwrite. Typically, if you have a BSS overwrite, a standard technique would be to try to overwrite the detours section, which comes after. But if you move the BSS section before another non-writable section, then you cannot overwrite the whole section and then the detour section. So that's it. And the full railroad is basically, yeah, like you mentioned, having a static GOT, a global offset table, which prevents an attacker from overwriting an entry directly in the global offset table. So say you overwrite the pointer to printf inside the GOT. Like next time the application would call printf, it would execute the code you're pointing to. So to avoid that, you can have just a static global offset table. So well, a bunch of properties. Then it tries to check like what are the address space layer randomization probabilities. Like what is the probability of a given mapping to be at a given place. We'll see later why this is interesting. Okay, we can see there are a bunch of sections, like 76 sections inside the mapping of SSH. Then we check a bunch of kernel properties, and then we do all the stuff that I will describe later on. Okay, so the tool is not yet available. I plan to make it available like by September 1st. I need 5 volunteers to make sure this happens. Basically, I'm going to give you the source code, and if I fail at publishing in exactly a month, you please release that on public mailing lists. All right. So obviously, if you want to contribute and stuff, I'm definitely welcoming patches and stuff. This is a strong motivation, and this is part of why coming to conferences and stuff and share the source code. Obviously. Here we go. So we're gonna go back to a few basics. If it's too easy, you guys please let me know, because I have 1 zillion slides, and this is not the most interesting stuff. So why do applications crash? So basically, you can have stack corruptions. I expect everybody to be familiar with it. This has been, described a lot. An application can die because of a signal 6. For instance, if your application calls abort because you got a heap corruption, and your libc is actually detecting this corruption, it's not going to call exit like it probably should later on. It's just going to abort, right? Which is a different scenario. Basically, this is not exploitable. And the third case is getting a signal 11, which means segmentation fault. A segmentation fault is when you're trying to access particular section or memory address in a way you're not supposed to. Like you're trying to execute memory which is not executable, or you're trying to write to a memory which is not writable. All right, so because of the permission, there are basically 3 ways for this to happen. It can be either an invalid read, an invalid write, or an invalid execute. Why does this happen? It can be basically like, okay, segmentation fault can happen because of any kind of memory corruption. So it can be like integer overflow, or it can be uninitialized memory, variable misuse. It can be pretty much any kind of vulnerability, which later on triggers a segmentation fault. Okay, more basic stuff. How do you exploit? Okay, so if your application dies on call EAX and you control EAX, it's not too tough, right? You have EAX point to your shell code, and you get arbitrary code execution. Now, if it's an invalid read, what do you guys think? How do you exploit an invalid read? Truth is, usually you don't. Like most invalid reads accessed in read mode are not exploitable. The best you could do is for the application to read from a section you control, from a memory region you control. So the value which is passed to the application is actually controlled, and this could trigger another bug inside the application. But in itself, it's not exploitable. Okay, what about invalid reads? Why is this a read? Okay, it's a move instruction, but why is it a read? Okay, in intersyntax, like the source is on the left. So here, no, the source is on the right and the destination on the left. So here it's like a pointer dereference, if you will, in write mode. Sorry? You can't see the source. I'm sorry, I cannot move my computer to, you know. Like the whole screen is truncated. That kind of sucks. Okay. How do you exploit invalid writes? So that's really the meat. The usual way to exploit invalid memory write, think for instance like missing format string, would be, okay, so either to attack a function pointer like we said, or attack the global offset table. Thing is, this can be prevented. Like you can have a linker which does not include a detour section, so you don't have destructors at all. And like we mentioned, you can have a static GOT. So like all those tricks we've been having are actually not good enough nowadays. Now, what we're going to do is, in case we get an invalid memory write, is try to open the scope a bit and check if function pointer inside, say, libraries are not dereferenced. Because if we can overwrite a function pointer, so anywhere inside the application, but also in global data from any writable section which belongs to shared libraries, we win. Thing is, this takes a lot of reverse engineering. Like, typically what you would do if you got something like that, like if you could trigger a bug which creates an invalid memory write, would probably be to single step inside your debugger to try to find a function pointer dereferenced. And like, if the application is pretty big, you'll just never find it. This is not scalable. So we need to find something better. One more boring stuff, and then we go for the hardcore technique. So when writing exploits, we have to take into account a bunch of features and enhancements of the operating system, which are basically security measures to prevent easy exploitation. So that would be, for instance, address space layer randomization, non-executable sections, being it because of hardware or kernel emulation. Like we mentioned, so compiler enhancements such as relocation, static GOT, or stack cookies. So ASLR is a big problem, but ASLR is not perfect. Like if you're using Fedora, for instance, by default, pre-linking is active, which is a mechanism which allows application to be run faster by predetermining in memory to which location they're going to be. By default, so it's active by default on Fedora, and the memory mapping of any given binary changes every 2 weeks, which is, oh, come on, it completely sucks. I mean, it completely breaks ASLR, right? If you can somehow determine the mapping of the binary, and we'll see later on how to do that, then you can most probably exploit, at least write, a very good exploit for this particular target. Old kernels don't have a very good randomization. The newer one usually do. And okay, one more thing. If your binary is not compiled as a position-independent executable, you get the main sections of the binary itself. So not like the shared libraries, but the main binary, non-randomized at all. All right. under a standard distribution, only very few applications are actually compiled as position-independent executables, which would be network daemons and possibly like web browsers. Like in particular, setread binaries under Ubuntu at least are never compiled as position-independent executables. All right, so how do you test randomization? So this is what we got with SSH. How come I cannot go up? Okay, so basically what we do is we execute a given binary a great number of times, typically 100 times, and we check if the mapping of a given section is at the same place or not. It's that simple. So let's have a better example maybe with a setread binary. We're going to do exactly the same thing, but with sudo, for instance, or su. Okay. So su, and instead of entering my password, I just stop the application. Here is a process ID. Okay, so if we look at the randomization properties, like I just told you, like the main binary is not compiled as position-independent executable, so some section have 100% probabilities to be at the same location, right? The rest of the application, comprised of shared libraries, the heap, and the stack, will have a different mapping pretty much all the time. Like we get only a probability around 3%, which is pretty bad. The stack and the heap always have an independent mapping, but shared libraries are just translated one from each other. So this may play a role, and keep it in mind. All right. Okay, here we go for the hardcore thing. Okay, so what we want to do is, in case I have an invalid memory write, I want to know, among all the writable data inside the mapping, where shall I write to achieve proper code execution? So basically, I want to transform a write into a execute. So to do that, like we mentioned, the most obvious target would be function pointers. We'll see that you can actually think of other means to achieve that, like call tables, or if you have like a base offset plus a base address plus an offset, if you can have a write either the base address or the offset in memory at a very precise location, and the conjunction, I mean the addition of the base address plus the offset be the reference later on, then you can also win. So the main idea is basically I have a given mapping, I have tons of writable data in it, and I'd like to test them all. So what we're going to do is take our application at crash time, and this is why it's called post-memory corruption memory analysis, because the analysis actually starts once the process has emitted a segfault, so it's technically dead. First thing, we resurrect it by just clearing the signal, and we pretend nothing happened. What we want to emulate is actually like the invalid write which just happened. I'd like to see like if it had been a proper valid write somewhere in memory, like the application would look a lot the same, and I'd like to test like to which place I should write to transform this memory write into a proper modification of the execution flow. So to do that, we take the main process and we force it to fork zillions of times, and in each offspring we are creating, we overwrite at a different address with the known canary value, and we keep on executing. Yeah. And if one of the offsprings actually tries to execute the memory location of the canary value we've just used to override it, then we know that we just found a function pointer. I'm going to give a better example. So how do we do that first? So we take a process which is technically dead, just emitted a segmentation fault. We clear the signals, and to force it to fork, we use this methodology. Basically, we need to find an executable location. We're going to inject some shellcode inside it. So if I inject my shellcode in a region which is not executable, I'm pretty sure I won't be able to execute it. So what we do is find an executable location, save the registers. You can do all of it using ptrace. Then we inject inside this process a small fork shellcode, which forces the application to fork. We execute this shellcode. So then we have two processes, right? We have the original one, and we have the newly created one. We restore the modification we've just done when injecting the shellcode. So we patch back a few bytes in both processes, and we restore registers in both processes. Yeah, the shellcode for just forking is pretty simple. Okay, so it works like that. You have an original process, right? And you can duplicate it many times. And then in each process, we're going to try a different overwrite with a given value. So I use, for instance, as a canary, you can use F1, F2, F3, F4, which points to kernel memory, no matter what your kernel split is, right? So if the application actually tries to execute F1, F2, F3, F4, you're sure it's going to be invalid, and you're sure it's going to be because of your override. So that would be the first process. In the second one, we set F1, F2, F3, F4 at a different location, etc. Okay? So the good thing is we can actually, without changing ASLR, right, because we just forked a process, so the mapping is exactly the same as the original one, we can test different scenarios, like typically different kind of overwrites. And we don't need to use breakpoints, so the application can be arbitrarily big, like SSH or whatever, or a web browser, and it's still going to work. Problem is, so if we start forking like crazy, we're going to create zillions of processes, and the master process from which we forked, so we keep it, we don't want to modify it. So basically, we're going to create zillions of zombies, because all those processes we just created, upon termination, we'll try to send a sick child signal to the master process, and this process is stopped. So basically, we're just creating zillions of zombies. So we have to take care of that. Another limitation of the tool is that basically, any kind of inter-process communication is going to be wrong. Like, if the master process was writing inside a socket, when the offsprings will later on try to write in those sockets, the socket may be closed or something, like in an unpredictable state. So we have to take care of that too. Anyway, so killing the zombies is not really a problem. So if we inject a small shellcode inside the parent, which tells him like basically ignore the sick child, we won't have this problem of creating zillions of zombies, right? They will just not emit the sick child at all. The offsprings may still create processes we are unaware of. So to take care of that, we're gonna kill all the newly created offsprings and all their own children. Okay. Okay, that's it. All right, so to kill all the zombies, we use something called process grouping. Maybe it's not too known, but like it's a standard Linux system call. Okay, so the methodology is exactly the same as injecting the fork shellcode, only like we inject a different shellcode. Okay. You guys survived? Now we go for the fun stuff. Okay, so like we mentioned, we'd like to test automatically, like overwrite of all the writable data. Anyway, if you can write anywhere in memory, like all the regions you can write to are actually writable. It sounds like pretty simple, but it means that when writing a debugger, determining the amount of data you could write to is pretty obvious. You just look for writable sections, and we're going to try to overwrite every single byte in it. Okay, so to do that, we parse all the, say we want to find all the function pointers. So we check all the writable memory location. We look if sequences of 4 bytes are actually pointing to another section. If they do, we can optionally try to disassemble the destination location, right? It has to be executable, otherwise it's not a function pointer, right? And then we use the mkfork thing to create zillions of children. In each children, we overwrite with F1, F2, F3, F4, all those possible function pointer we found. And then we monitor execution of all of them. So if we end up in one of the offsprings executing memory location F1, F2, F3, F4, we just found a function pointer. Yeah, it's important to know, to notice that it's equivalent. Like, it's not possible to miss any function pointer if we proceed this way, right? Okay. Oh, one more thing. Maybe you've seen a few tools which try to offer similar features by just doing a static analysis of the memory. This is not possible because you may list all the existing function pointers, but you will not know which one would actually have been dereferenced if the invalid write did not occur. So the methodology has to be dynamic. Our goal is not to list possible function pointers. We want to know all the function pointer which will have been dereferenced after the invalid memory write. So let's give a small demo for this. Well, actually, there was a pretty good one. Oh, it's dead. Let's try SSH again. Okay. Oh, this one. Okay, so we have described the fact of trying ASLR. Then we parse every writable section looking for possible function pointers. We create a linking list of such possible pointers, and then we make the application fork many times, and in each possible writable memory location, or every possible function pointer, we try to overwrite it with F1, F2, F3, F4. So let's see what happens. Possibly valid function pointer, so that's from static analysis only. We found 186. Pretty surely 186 in the whole mapping won't be dereferenced by SSH normally, right? So now we have to check, it's bugging, we have to check which one are actually dereferenced. Okay, let me try with another application because it apparently got stuck. Okay, so I'm going to try with sudo. Okay, so I stopped sudo, and imagine that magically I trigger an invalid write inside sudo right now? I want to know which function pointer are actually going to be dereferenced. All right, so it's going pretty fast. It found 169 by static analysis. Then, by using this, the fact of forcing the application to fork and overwriting in each soft spring, it found a few interesting function pointers. So this one has a repeatability of 100%, right? Meaning that if I write to memory location 080670EC, I am sure to achieve arbitrary code execution, right? So I transform my invalid write into an arbitrary code execution. Any question? Okay, the smart question would be like, but come on. Even if you can execute arbitrary memory location, like you cannot execute your shellcode anymore because memory sections are not writable and executable at the same time in 2011, right? So we'll try to see that later on, or to achieve actually a proper remote execution when we have that. Okay, so it kind of worked. Another mode of the tool, so later on, is to try to not be too smart about the static analysis when looking for function pointers, but just trying to overwrite any given location in memory with a canary value and see if this has an impact. Like, are you triggering another segmentation fault of a different kind maybe, or a stack overflow, right? Or maybe by overwriting, no, I don't have one of them here, okay. Maybe by overwriting a given location, which is not at all a function pointer, you can actually trigger another bug. So we want to check all of those. All right, any question? Yeah. So you do it in a snapshot, like at the very moment your application catches a segmentation fault, you can list the existing memory location, right? You can get it off /proc, for instance, and even memory. Okay, I'm going to show you something. So the process ID for this one was 915. When you run the tool, it actually creates you a folder which is called report, and then the process ID, which contains, so each of those files are basically memory dumps, right, of each location. And by parsing all the writable sections, so function pointer, they are located in writable sections, and they point to executable code, right? And in addition, like most of the time, it's not a really good heuristic, but still, it's going to point to a function prologue, right? Every function in the C library, for instance, does not have a standard prologue, but you can still look for it. So what you do is like every memory location sequentially, you look if it could point to an executable section, you try to disassemble the destination, and if it looks like a proper function pointer, you save it. That's what I call static analysis. Good question. Any other question? Okay, you guys don't like questions, so for the best question of the day, I will get a bottle of wine. If nobody gets a question, you get it. All right. Okay, so overflows are a particular kind of invalid memory write. We can see it that way, in the sense that they usually have a length. Instead of writing just 4 bytes or one pointer, they overwrite sequentially memory. The tool currently, so it can check invalid memory writes which happen like randomly and at a very precise location, or overflows. Say you have an overflow in the BSS. Can you actually overwrite a function pointer in the BSS, right? So it's able to check that too. How do you do it? Well, basically you take the output of our previous analysis and you truncate it like to the section you're interested on, and that's it. Okay, no. Invalid memory writes are not always like, you don't always control and the destination you're writing to and the content you're writing. Sometimes you don't have that much control, right? So we're going to see subcases which are still interesting, where you have less control either on the data being written or you have less control over the location to which you're writing. Okay. So if we can't overwrite, yeah. So if you don't control at all the data you're writing, you can choose any location you want, but you don't get to choose which data you're writing. This happens a lot. Like if your invalid memory write is caused by an earlier bug, which for instance reads from padding in memory and stuff, you can only write 0. What do you do when you can only write 0 at any given location you want? You can try a function pointer truncation, all right? So the tool actually tries to automate this too. Like what it does when it finds function pointers, it tries like by truncation, would it be possible to truncate the function pointer so that it points to valid memory, either writable or executable. So this is an instance of the tool running. It tells you that if the only value you can write is 41, 42, 43, 44, you can actually perform several truncations on several pointers, and they will point to valid memory, in this case, writable memory. So like truncations can be of different size. They can be upper truncations, lower truncations. The tool can check all of this automatically. Another interesting situation is where the location you get to write is actually 4-byte aligned. So you don't get to write to any location you want, but just a multiple of 4. Just for the, like, I wrote this tool because I faced this problem, like in first place, right? And then it grew up a bit, and I thought it was worth sharing. So how do we do that? Any idea? So if we don't have absolute control over the location we want to write to, we're not going to try a truncation, most probably, because like the pointers in memory are usually aligned because of the compiler. It's much faster to access memory which is aligned, so the compiler is going to try to align all the function pointers. So finding a function pointer is most likely not going to work. If it does, the tool is going to report it anyway. So if we find an unaligned function pointer, we're back to the previous case. But if we don't, we have a plan B. The plan B is to check if the application is actually accessing unaligned memory itself. So to do that, we set a special flag in the eFlag register. All right? It's called the unaligned flag. And every time the application is going to read or write to unaligned memory, the debugger will receive a signal 7. So this way we can very easily detect if the application is trying to read or write to unaligned memory. So my current machine is not 64-bit, but I have a video of this working on 64-bit. And if we have time, I'll do it on a 32-bit too. Okay, so this is also an SSH example. So we check the PID, we initiate SSH connection. We just created a new process. So we copy the PID, and we run the debugger, asking him to check all the unaligned memory access from no. So we just add the unaligned flag. All right? Then, yeah. You guys can see that? Okay, it's basically 64-bit instructions, and every time the application is actually either reading or writing to unaligned memory, we catch it, right? So for instance here, L14, all right. Okay, here it's because of the +3, right? The read is unaligned. Sure. Yeah, so I'm using another library which is called BAE Engine. It's done by a French guy who does a lot of malware analysis and stuff, and I thought it was pretty good. Yeah, the previous version was actually 32-bit only because of the limitation you just mentioned. Like libdisasm is an old disassembly stuff which only handles 32-bit. Any question? Okay. Okay, I gave you the video demo for 42-bit, for 64-bit. Let's have a proper demo for 32. I'm just going to use inedit, which is a text editor. So we pass it the PID and underline. Okay, it's taking a bit of time at the very beginning because it's dumping all the sections to disk and stuff, and this can take some time. It should not end like that. Okay. And if I start typing stuff, you can see that we get a bunch of memory access to underlying memory. So if you had to do this manually, and especially detect, you know, if you wanted to find all those information by proper reverse engineering, like it would take just ages. Either you go single stepping, and like this is not too scalable, or you just disassemble the whole memory, like all the sections, including the shared libraries and stuff, and you put breakpoints to locations which you think may be it later on during execution. This is just a nightmare. So doing it automatically is pretty cool. Okay, this is a bit difficult. Like, how do you automate ASLR leakage? So basically, there was an exploit in Consequest 2010, which was pretty revolutionary, because using JavaScript and a heap overflow, it could deduce the mapping of the binary. How does it work? Basically, so you have strings in JavaScript, they are null terminated, and if your overflow overwrites the null at the end of the string, when manipulating the string later on in JavaScript, you will be able to read more than the normal size of the string because you remove the null terminator of the size of the string. So by doing that, you get to read the few following bytes following your normal string. And if this contains a pointer to another memory location, you can read it back, right? And you can deduce like what is the mapping of your binary. So, is that okay? You guys get the idea? So using an invalid memory write, if we overwrite a null terminator or something in a string, most probably when we read it back, we can read the a few trailing bytes, which may contain information regarding ASLR. If we want to generalize this stuff a lot, so first off, most applications don't use JavaScript, right? Like network daemons and stuff don't use JavaScript. So if we want to generalize it a lot, we think like, okay, if I'm a process and I want to send information back to the attacker, basically either I'm going to use system calls like write, to write to files and stuff like that, or I'm going to use what used to be syssend or send-to, right, to write over a socket. Okay, syssend and send-to do not exist anymore. They are embedded in socket all, which is like a new wrapper for it. The first parameter you give it, like EBX, contains the method you're actually going to use. So So the idea is we're going to use P2A syscall, which gonna break on every syscall emitted. And if it's a write or if it's a send, we record what the application is actually sending, like from which memory location and what is the size of the data. So say you have SSH, you find an invalid memory write inside SSH, right? You'd like to use this precise write to later on, when the application is sending data back to you for asking a password, for instance, right? You'd like him to send you back a lot more information than it should, okay? So to do that, we record all the syscalls which are emitted, in particular write and send, and we check the size parameter which is sent back and from which offset it's actually sending. And then when we're going to use the fact of creating zillions of offsprings and stuff, inside each of the offsprings, we also use P2A syscall to monitor those writes and those send, and we compare the parameters to the one from the proper original application. If at a given point in time, one of the offspring is trying to send more data than the original process did, then we just found a memory leak, right? And this memory leak may contain the few bytes we need to later on write a proper exploit. If you get back to what we said previously regarding pre-linking and stuff, then you get the idea of what is bad. Like if I'm using sudo and I have an arbitrary write, I can use this arbitrary write to try to find an information leakage inside the application. And then even if the application dies, I mean, the mapping, if I try a second time, is going to be exactly the same, right? And now I have a fairly good idea of what the mapping looks like, thanks to this previous leakage. Is that okay? Is that clear? Okay. No question about that? Fine. Okay, we're going to see a few ways to extend the tool. So you don't have to look only for function pointer. We can try to overwrite other locations in memory, like all the writable locations in memory, for instance. So we cannot try every location memory with every possible value, but we can try every possible location in memory with a few values. And this would give us a fairly good idea of, if we can later on trigger, say, a Stack Overflow, which is a lot easier to exploit, right? I mean, at least there is a lot more literature regarding it. Another thing would be like, if you have a call table, like, or a structure calling something like offset plus register, if you can overwrite either the base register or the offset one, you win. So we test that automatically also with Pmcma. Okay, another thing. This is a bit tough. So imagine we have a binary, and all the writable sections do not have the same randomization properties. Like, we're executing sudo, the data section and BSS section of sudo have no randomization, right? Like we've seen before. But the shared libraries, they have high randomization. Say we find a function pointer inside a shared library. So technically, it's going to be tough to exploit because, like, every time I'm going to rerun the binary, the mapping is going to be different, and my function pointer is going to be at a different location. But if this function pointer is actually inside a structure, and there is in the writable section which has no ASLR a pointer to this section, what I can try to hijack is actually not the function pointer in the shared library directly, but like create a fixed structure entirely, right? So if I detect if I detect a pointer to a structure which contains a function pointer, it may be easier to fake the whole structure instead of attacking the pointer in the shared library. So how do we detect that? So basically, okay, we're going to inject a new, we need to create a new mapping inside the application. So to do that, we use a shellcode, a small shellcode inside the original process. And it's basically just a call to mmap. So it creates a new mapping. And this new mapping, we give it a padding, which is easy to recognize, like 010101, 020202, something like that. Something you can later on rediscover. And when we try to overwrite in memory, in all our offsprings, instead of writing with F1, F2, F3, F4 like we did previously to detect function pointers, we overwrite with the address of this new mapping. So what happens? Like if one of the offspring is actually trying to dereference a pointer inside this mapping we just created, is gonna do like, you know, it's gonna be just a few bytes after inside this new mapping we've created. And if we give this mapping a particular padding, like I mentioned, for instance, 010101, 020202, if the application later on tries to execute 020202 in memory, well, you know that you win. So this is a pretty effective way also to reduce the difficulty of working with ASLR. Okay, that's the shellcode. Okay. So we can check for arbitrary reads, but that's not really very effective in the sense like memory reads are not directly exploitable, but we can check if performing a controlled invalid read, so making the application read from a location we control and reading a value we control and putting it into a register to do something else, is going to trigger later on another vulnerability which is easier to exploit. So to do that, either we can try the 4 billion possible values on 32-bit, or just if we, like, this is going to take ages. So a good heuristic would be to try just a few evenly spaced values among all the search scope. Last thing, so like I told you before, even if we find a function pointer to overwrite and we completely control it, we won't be able to execute our shellcode directly, right? Because in 2011, if you introduce shellcode, it's going to be in a writable section, and writable sections are typically not executable. Anybody wants to win a bottle of wine? How do you solve this problem? Okay. I came up with this. I'm pretty sure some people already know it, but to my knowledge, this is the first public description of this solution. So what we do, so we control a function pointer and we can resume execution wherever we want, but we don't try to modify the function pointer to execute our shellcode directly. What we do is return to a carefully chosen function epilogue so that it's going to desynchronize the stack. Like, so the application is not expecting this to happen, but let me give you a better example. Like, let's say we are attacking sudo, and at the very moment we trigger the invalid write, the stack is about 1,000 byte big. If we return to the function prologue, like this one, which is a lot bigger than 1,000, right? Then we're going to return after the normal stack. So what do you find after the normal stack? You find, for instance, environment variables. So if we put our own environment variable with a fake stack frame, right? When ESP is going to be incremented when returning to a prologue which switches ESP by a lot, then we can create our own stack frames inside our environment variable after the stack. Typically, in this case, you don't use a proper NOP sled in the sense like, you know, like 0x90. what you use as an op-sled is just a pointer to a ret instruction in memory. So if you are checking sudo, some of the mapping, like we mentioned, is static, even executable, like the main dot text of the executable is static. It contains a few rets. You use a pointer to that as your op-sled. Then the strategy is, for instance, to, okay, I want to execute my shellcode, arbitrary shellcode, and I'm going to put it in the BSS section because it's writable, and I'm going to turn it into executable. So to do that, we copy. So the BSS is also, it's worth noticing that the BSS is also not randomized, right, in sudo. So we copy the shellcode. Now we're forging fake stack frames. So we forge stack frames to copy byte per byte the shellcode we want in the BSS section, right? This is standard stuff using ret to PLT, right? The PLT is also not randomized. It's inside the main executable. Okay, then we face a problem. So we can copy your whole shellcode inside the BSS section. Thing is, it's not executable. And to turn it into executable, so we would like to call mprotect. Mprotect is not part of the function that sudo would normally call. So there is no GOT entry for mprotect. So a strategy is to use ROP to read the content of the address of, say, printf inside the GOT. And since inside your C library, the distance from printf to mprotect is a constant one, if you read your pointer from the GOT and add it the same constant offset and write it back to the GOT, next time you're going to call printf, you're actually going to call mprotect. So this is a way to introduce mprotect inside the GOT. Anyway, after we back to ret to PLT, and when I say call mprotect, we actually call the slot of printf. This allows us to change the memory permissions on the BSS, and then we just return to our shellcode. Any question? Yep. What is a stack canary? Oh, if we're using stack canaries, honestly, it would not matter because okay. My own sudo is compiled with stack canaries, stack cookies. They're typically checked before you switch the stack pointer, right? They are checked before the read instruction. So if you return to your, an arbitrary function prologue like that, you don't have any problem with canaries. And later on, when you're forging your own stack frames, well, you're using ret to PLT, so you don't really care, right? But good question. Yep, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, no worries, terrific. Okay. Yeah, you can do that also. You can use mmap and create a new section, yeah. But like if you take modern distributions, they usually avoid writable and executable, right? So even though you create a new section, if you have to choose between writable and executable, it's not too helpful. You're gonna need to use mprotect later on. Yeah, yeah. But if you're not using JR security and stuff, and your distribution is actually accepting writable and executable sections, that would be an equally complex option, I reckon. Okay. I'm lazy. Okay, we're gonna check how to perform all those operations inside sudo. So the debugger is actually gonna emulate the fact of So finding function pointers, overwriting function pointers, and in the end of the analysis, it's actually going to try to emulate what we just mentioned, the stack desynchronization thing, right? So at the end of it, we should get a shell. You can see that the number of zombies is pretty low, right? There were 33, 49. Like, we're creating hundreds of processes, and we can keep the number of processes pretty low. Okay. So if we look here on the left, after the normal run of the tool, it found a few function pointers which are good candidates for overwriting. So it overwrites it, and instead of returning to writable section, which is not allowed, so the tool emulates the fact of having, like we mentioned, a stack desynchronization. The shellcode used in this application is actually, so it may sound a bit weird for sudo, but I wanted the tool to be generic. So what it does is try to set reread, so to try to recover privileges if they've been dropped, and then bind a shell on port 6666. So on the right, you can see that sudo is actually opening a port, right? A TCP well, is binding port 6666, which is like a bit unusual for sudo. And if we connect to it, yeah, so we get a shell. Okay. Any question? Okay, I'm cheating, it's a video, but I'll try to do a proper demo in the end. Future work, where I need your help. So currently it's working on 32-bit CPUs pretty properly. Not yet on 64-bit architectures. It depends on distributions and stuff. So this is why we're going to release the tool only next month. If you'd like to port it to a more operating system, so as long as your kernel supports ptrace and fork, it should be pretty easy. The only thing is I have a pretty strong use of /proc. So if you don't have a /proc, you may need to brute force the memory location or get them via another way. Porting to Windows is like, honestly, super hard. I don't believe it's even achievable. Let's see. And we expect to add like more tests for other subclasses of invalid write or other strategies. No questions? Yeah. Absolutely. At once? Yeah, so yeah, that would be an option. Thing is, if you overwrite all the possible function pointers, how do you get to know which one was the one you actually dereferenced? Yeah, so that's an option. Thing is, when you're attacking an application, and so say I'm overwriting with F1, F2, F3, F4. Sometime the address, which is actually executed in memory, because you're not exactly overwriting a function pointer, but like something like a base address plus an offset, is not going to be exactly F1, F2, F3, F4. It could be like, you know, F1, F2, F7, whatever. Yeah, so it's a bit tough to do, but I reckon it would speed up the whole thing. Another thing is like, for the time being, I'm doing all the overwrites sequentially, so creating a new offspring only when the previous one was dead. And this is actually not necessary. We could use multi-threading for that, which would speed up the analysis a bit. Yeah, a good question. Yeah? I'm not hearing you at all. I'm not hearing you at all. Can you come closer?
So, could you inject some shell code to map another area of memory, add this to put a break state
Yeah, so that's much like the strategy we have to when we're looking for pointers to structure, we contain function pointers. Yeah, I reckon we could use that too. If you want to submit the patch, I take it. It's a good idea. But what's the benefit in terms of performance? Like, if you do that, yeah. Okay. I agree. It's a good idea. It's a good idea. So let's do it. Any other question? Nobody wants wine? Okay, you get it.